This is Hal Mendelson, retired librarian from the University of Central Florida, Orlando, Florida. I'm here to interview SELA past president, George Stewart, who served in office from 1988 to 1990. And thank you, George, for your willingness to be interviewed today. George, my first question is, discuss your background in libraries, please.
Okay, and I'm waiting for a red light, right?
Yes.
No, you can go ahead, George.
Okay, I see recording now. Well, my background in libraries is my mother walked me across the park to our neighborhood branch when I started in the first grade and signed me up for my card. And from then on, I was a loyal member of the Central Park Branch Library. And then at age 16, I found out there was going to be, actually I was still 15, and there was going to be an opening as a page or a bookshelfer at Central Park in the next month. So I went over and signed up and I got that job. And that was in 1960. And I had no inclination or thought whatever of working for the library. But I stayed working for the Birmingham Public Library while I was in high school so I could go to college. And I stayed working in Birmingham Public Library while I was in college so that I could finish graduate school so that I could teach. And by the time I had gotten to that point, I had gone to work in the Southern History Collection at the main library, and I was hooked. That was like I said, I started in 1960, and I finally left in 1998. So they figured out how to get me out the door. But I've done everything from shelf books to clean out the drains, and in the branch libraries, pretty well whatever needs to be done. So if the restrooms need cleaned, I cleaned the restrooms. But downtown, I worked as again as a page and a library assistant, and then as a reference librarian, and then as an assistant department head, and then as a department head, and then while I was in my last quarter at Emory, Matt Thornley, who was the director, had a heart attack. And Richard N. Ramsey became the director, and I had the opportunity to step in as associate director. So I took that job in 1970, and I stayed there until January of 77, and I became the director. And I was a director until 93, and we had organized the countywide cooperative in that time period. And beginning in 93, I became director of the countywide cooperative. And I stayed there until 98. And then when I left there, I thought, well, I'm probably going to have to find something else to do other than libraries. And an opportunity opened up to catalog the book collection at the Alabama Department of Archives and History. It had never been done. So I worked down there for about 7 or 8 years cataloging that collection. And then I came home and did something else for a year or so, and the opportunity came along to catalog the historic map collection at Birmingham Public, which had never been cataloged. Part of it had been done in Dewey, but the main collection was in LC. So I cataloged the entire map collection in LC. And that ended 2 years ago. And since that time, I've been working as a bookkeeper. And I learned bookkeeping working at the library in the county cooperative, because it was a one-person, at that time it was a one-person office. And I had to maintain all the books and apply for the grants and keep up with the grants and this, that, and the other. So it's been a long and very happy mode. As far as library work, I've never had a job I didn't like.
You definitely have a extended career, and you know libraries backwards and forwards with all the different positions you've held. Anything else you want to add to that, George, or are you ready for the next question?
Let me add one thing. Over the years, I've come across a lot of librarians who never planned to be librarians. They sort of stumbled into it while doing something else or planning to do something else, usually teach. And that's the way I did too. As I said, I never set out to have librarianship as a career, but Thornley, who was the director at Birmingham Public, was a wonderful mentor. And he kept encouraging me, giving me jobs that were more and more interesting at Birmingham Public, and made it possible for me to go to graduate school. At that time, there was not a graduate school in Alabama, so I had to go out of state, and I picked Emory, and he made it possible for me to go on my vacation time and maintain my salary. And at that time, the state of Alabama reimbursed, I think, tuition for programs that were not offered within the state of Alabama. So I owe an awful lot to a lot of people.
I think your comment about individuals not originally planning on going to library school, but they do. There's, I think, a large number of people. I think that reflects their employment history also.
Yeah.
All right, question number 2. Describe your history with SELA, such as your first involvement, positions held, and other service.
Well, my first involvement would have been, I'm sure, a convention. And I can't tell you where or when, but I remember that Charles Beard was there. And I met Charles at the meeting, which is the first time I'd ever met Charles. And Charles and I were lifetime friends until his death. But I met him at the meeting. And he didn't dwell particularly on SELA, but we were both at the meeting and found out we had a lot of interest in common. And shortly after that, he went to the University of Alabama. Matter of fact, he may have already been at the University of Alabama, I've forgotten. So we had paths that crossed within Alabama at that point, the Alabama Library Association or various meetings and conventions. But having gone to conventions, you know, they're always interested in anybody who's willing to serve on a committee. So I got involved in doing committee work, initially with the public library group, and then later with some, I think, preservation or archival groups, something like that. But the more committees I was involved in, of course, the more meetings I attended with SLAA, until eventually I was going to the board meetings, executive meetings, or wherever we had committee meetings reporting. Then I became treasurer and president-elect, and of course that was president. And we had the convention when I was president was held jointly with Tennessee. We had a wonderful meeting in Nashville at Opryland. Thanks almost entirely to the hard work of Jim Ward, who was president-elect and was also the convention chairman that year. But I had an interesting opportunity during my time as president. I tried to go to the state meetings of each state organization. And I think I made all but 1 or 2. I think Arkansas had just come into SLA at that point. And I did not make that meeting, I don't think. And 1 other state did not meet during that period. But I had a wonderful time going and meeting a lot of people that I would have, and going a lot of places that I would have not otherwise gone. And then after that, at that time, SLA was closely involved with SOLANET at that point. And having been president of SLA, I got involved in committee work with SOLANET and did sort of the same thing. Wound up serving on their board and serving as a representative to OCLC. So SELA provided a lot of opportunities for me to meet a lot of folks and go a lot of places that I would otherwise not have done.
Able to see different parts of the country, and
Yes.
kind of interesting going from place to place and seeing how different library associations and what they're working on. So I'm sure it's interesting. Okay, ready for number 3? Question number 3?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, please talk about your time as president of SELA. For instance, could you share any major accomplishments, initiatives, or challenges you faced while president?
Well, I guess it's certainly not unique to my presidency, but the budget was always a problem. We always seemed to live on a razor-thin budget. So we went through several plans to increase revenue, not necessarily raise rates, but raise dues. But we tried to encourage more participation at the convention. We tried to offer workshops. As I said earlier, SELA was closely involved with SLAA. So we, in fact, several of our workshops sort of dealt with things that now have been incorporated into Lyricus's main body, things like conservation, restoration, disaster preparedness. SELA prepared some of those original workshops on those topics. And most of the people who were involved in SLAA in those subjects that had previously been involved in an SELA meeting about it. So I guess that would be the primary thing, just running things as normal and trying to represent the organization at as many chapters as possible, and working with SLAA to try to build together some statewide organization.
Must be interesting looking back and seeing the changes that have taken place, huh?
A lot.
Okay. Question number 4. As you gaze into your crystal ball, what advice do you have for SELA to remain relevant during the next 10, 25, 50 years?
I think that's a very hard one. I think just keeping public libraries or university libraries meaningful is going to be enough of a challenge. But I think SELA is not unique in this. I think almost every voluntary organization is facing the same kind of challenge, and it's not a new kind of challenge. But I think the fact that you can attend conferences, video conferencing, the fact that you can produce programs and so on without expensive printing costs and things like that, they're all going to change. They've already changed how organizations prosper or don't prosper. I personally think the biggest thing that SELA could offer is some really meaningful workshops, either at its regular convention or between the conventions. And I mean something that someone feels like it's worth attending, not just to go. I think the day of librarians going to meetings which involve travel and hotels and so on, unless they're at the upper end of the scale of the library profession, I think those are going to be more and more limited. So I think we're going to have to produce things that really are worth attending. And in this respect, I really think a regional operation like SELA has an advantage over a big national group like ALA. Now, ALA will always have people who go because ALA is a destination point. It's a sort of a vacation for a lot of people. So SELA can offer programs and so on a regional basis that most of the people in the region could never go to ALA or any other national meeting. I think we can keep ourselves alive and vibrant and truly meaningful by offering continuing educational opportunities.
Yes, I know the conferences I've gone to in the past that you find out about the different states and what they're doing and the programs. And the programs, you know, they were very well organized, and it did meet the needs of the librarians who attended. So yeah, providing those needed workshops, that really is the benefit of a regional library
Right,
system.
right.
Okay.
Sometime back after my term, Joe Forsey actually set up a convention, a committee, or some group to look into how to keep ourselves that way. So it's not a new topic, and I can't speak for what they found out, but I know it has been formally addressed.
Okay. Final question. Do you have any comments or stories about SELA that you would like to share?
There are a lot, and they're personal. SLAA gave me opportunities that I would have never had. I got to meet people that I might have heard about. I might even have read an article about them, but I would have never met them. I had the opportunity to sit down and have dinner with people I wouldn't have known. And it's amazing how much you can learn sharing a glass of wine with someone who has experienced the same problems that you're trying to overcome. They are at a meeting like SELA or anywhere else like that. You have the opportunity, if you take advantage of it, to spend some time with people who are a lot more knowledgeable than you are. I may be very smart in some area, but in somewhere else, I'm just plain dumb. And it takes the broad spectrum to run things or to serve the public. And I think SELA gave me that. I had a whole group of mentors that were developed through my connection to SELA. And I hope I got to replace some of that.
Yes, I think the camaraderie among the librarians, they're just, it's amazing how much each person tries to help each other.
Yeah.
And we say lots of stories. Yeah, they're just everyday stories, but they're kind of like unique at that time. And
Everyday stories, but you get to say, yes, I've either been there or that's where I am right now.
Yes. Well, you've had a few years in the career, George, and anything else before we end this? Anything else you'd like to say?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Okay, well, it was our pleasure.
Thank you very much for going to the trouble.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We're glad to get your comments and feedback. So thank you, George. It was a real pleasure meeting you, at least online,
Right.
and having the opportunity to interview you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care.